Grace and peace. My name is Dr. Chad Rimmer, and it's an honor to be asked by Dr. Wald Koenig to participate in the leadership and the teaching and the guiding of this course on environmental ethics and faith. And Dr. Wald Koenig's video has introduced the topics that we'll be covering during the course of the semester, as well as the people and the works that will be guiding us and joining us, accompanying us in our conversations. So I just want to take a few minutes to introduce myself and explain a little bit about the perspective that I bring to the course. I am an ordained ELCA pastor. After graduating from the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Gettysburg 12 years ago, I was ordained and have since served in the parishes in Pennsylvania, as well as through the ELCA Global Mission in Europe, in the Middle East, and now in Africa, where I serve as the theological advisor to the Lutheran Church of Senegal, where we're developing programs of theological study to train the next generation of pastors and church leaders. But before my theology studies, I studied biology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It's part of the reason why in my involvement in Denmark and other places I've been involved in green church issues and eco-theology. It's what led me back to the University of Edinburgh to study theological ethics and the role that ecology plays in the Christian moral formation of children. So obviously that's why I think it's a wonderful idea to use environmental ethics as a way to approach the study of theological ethics as a whole. Because ethics is concerned with knowledge about what we ought to do. It's not just a science about what is in the world, but what we think that we ought to do about that condition of our being. And so that's why ethics is known also as moral philosophy. It's the pursuit of wisdom about what we ought to do as beings. Now, throughout the history of thought, different people have derived lots of different systems for doing moral reasoning and for trying to deliberate together as individuals and as social beings on what we ought to do good in our life as individuals in a society. So we have systems of utilitarianism, pragmatism, emotivism, rationalism, deontology, empiricism, phenomenology, social contract, rights-based systems, care ethics, and more recently feminist liberation and post-colonial ethics. And all of these are important tools for understanding the study and the pursuit of theological ethics and how we might go about reasoning together about the oughts of our life. But each of these systems of evaluating or reasoning what it means to be moral, social, political beings that do good and do justice and make peace and seek freedom and all the rest of the virtues are rooted in some perspective on what it means to be human. And so to that pursuit, environmental ethics brings a particular perspective. Environmental ethics is based in the study of ecology, but it's not just about knowing metrics of ecosystems or population dynamics, behavioral ecology, and the rest, but how is it that learning about our relationship to the land and to other creatures on it inform or form our wisdom about who we are as human beings in a local ecology? Now, if you're like me, that study of your ecology didn't begin in a college lab or in a biology classroom, but in your relationship to a local environment as a kid. And for me, my embeddedness and my sense of place and my local ecology here in North Carolina growing up taught me something about how I ought to conserve and to steward this creation that really played a big role in forming my understanding of who I was. And so this is kind of how our relationship to the land relates to our pursuit of theological ethics. Because remember that deep in our creation narrative is this understanding that the knowledge of our moral condition is rooted in our relationship to the land, in our place in the garden. To name creatures is to know something about them. To tend the garden is to learn to live within our proper weight and to learn to honor the inherent value and the place of creatures that share the garden with us. Not to take too much from what is ours and not to take from certain trees, right? Our embedded relationship in creation informs our wisdom about our moral condition as human beings. So environmental ethics contributes to our pursuit of theological ethics from the perspective of a theology of creation and pneumatology that says that the human being is not just a rational being, but an intersubjective creature who thrives in life-giving harmony with other diverse creatures who are all together in a relationship to the Creator, who reminds us in various ways that the way that we measure justice in economics or in our society or politics has something to do with the flourishing of creatures and of all creation. So doing justice from an eco-theological perspective is about being makers or co-creators of the conditions for life that God intended for all creatures. It was actually Aldo Leopold who was the father of the land ethic, an early eco-philosopher and not a bad theologian in his own right, who wrote, "In the pines above the snow," he wrote, "acts of creation are ordinarily reserved for gods and poets, but humbler folk may circumvent this restriction if they know how. To plant a pine, for example, one need neither god nor poet. One need only a shovel. By virtue of this curious loophole in the rules, any clodhopper may say, 'Let there be a tree,' and there will be one. If his back be strong and his shovel be sharp, there may eventually be 10,000, and in the 7th year he may lean upon his shovel and look upon his trees, and find them good. God passed on his handiwork as early as the 7th day, but I notice he has since then been rather noncommittal about its merits. I gather either that he spoke too soon, or that trees stand more looking upon than do fig leaves and firmaments." Well, surely God didn't speak too soon, so Aldo Leopold's point stands, that trees and the land stand looking upon. So our participating in and attending to the flourishing and the suffering of the land teaches us a certain wisdom about what we are as creatures, what we ought to do for the flourishing of all creatures. So in this course, we'll be reminded, yes, that theological ethics is based on our reading of Scripture and our complex philosophical tradition, but also that the prophet's ethical call, the poems of the psalmist, the creeds, our theological tradition, the incarnation of Christ himself was embedded in creation. And so too is our own Christian formation, our worship, our moral theology that guides our Christian life is embedded in an experience of our incarnate ecological place. So I look forward to encouraging you and hopefully challenging you to think about the role that your relationship to the local ecology plays in your place and your theological pursuit of wisdom about how we are called to do justice and to make peace in creation as creatures of the Creator. For me, that's the pursuit of theological ethics, and I'm really looking forward to our semester together. Peace.